All right, so thank you everyone for coming to the unconference on preparing and inviting and welcoming new accessibility professionals into the field. I think this is going to be an exciting one because we were all new accessibility professionals at one point. Maybe some of us are. So I'm hoping that we have a lot of good insights. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Erica Braverman. I was a new accessibility professional not long ago. My first accessibility job was at Knowbility. I was a teacher before that. So when I was trying to get everyone's attention, I almost, not quite, almost said 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me, and I stopped myself in time, but it was a close call. It would have worked. Yeah, that would have been the primary session. Okay, guys. But the way this is going to work is that my assistant room host, Jimena, right? Jimena is going to be helping me pass the mic around. Please do wait till you get to the mic to speak, just because for the folks listening on Zoom, that will make sure that everyone is heard. Also, I have Serena helping me monitor the chat, so if questions come through, and there are no slides for this one, everything is just going to be conversation. And I think we're gonna take a break midway through. So just expect you will get a break. We're not gonna just be talking until 3. All right, so any leading questions for the group or talking points? Yes, I see Christina. Mike is coming over.
I kind of asked the question in the keynote. I am new to accessibility as well. I just started at the state agency 5 months ago. I'm on the accessibility team. So we have 1 year to get our website compliant, and we have lots and lots of PDFs, Excel files, all of that we need to be compliant with as well. We have an accessibility coordination team of about 30 people. We have a meeting every 2 months. Nobody speaks. Nobody is interested. Nobody cares. And so I am trying to figure out how I can help. Like I could help get people fired up about it and actually, let them know that this is really important. This is something that we should all be very interested in doing and excited to do. But it's just, there's no traction right now. Texas Water Development Board. Yeah. Oh, we have 2. Yeah. Well, 2 including me. So there's 3 of us. Yeah. And so it's us and, we're leading the team, but everybody else on the team, it's like, oh, this isn't my job. It's kind of secondary. It's put on the back burner. I don't have time for this. But, and especially being here, my eyes have opened tremendously on how important it is. But just, I feel like we're almost like the bad guys when we start talking. Yes, we have meetings like, okay, this is what, we're trying to remediate their documents. These are some issues that we find that you need to fix. And then they're just mad. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to see how I can help.
I also work for a state agency who my job isn't even accessibility. That's like my 3rd job almost. I'm in purchasing and contracts. So yeah, I feel you. One thing that has helped is show them. Go to your website, turn off the monitor and try to navigate. Like show what it looks like when it zooms in, show the Excel spreadsheet, show the PDFs and say, okay, now who cannot access this? Because at this point it's a choice. And that's not a fun conversation, but I've been getting louder.
So I will say we're going to have an in-person meeting in a couple of months, and we were thinking about doing like demonstrations, right? Putting a blindfold on them, doing things like that to show them, like you said, how it actually feels, because sometimes you don't know because you don't know, right? And people, it's very hard to think in another person's perspective if you've never been in that situation before.
I think we had Carmen was first and then.
So I'm going to give you my unpopular opinion and say that's never worked for me. It has never worked for me to turn off and navigate with a keyboard. It's never worked for me to turn off the screen. It's never worked for me to give anything about the human experience to convince people. What has worked for me is to walk in with a plan and say, we have this many PDFs that are inaccessible that are posted. How many of these actually have to be posted? And we're going to prioritize those. Are these documents that you regularly update? Let's fix the template. If are, you know, what web pages have to be up? Because right now you're in burn the house down mode with a year left, which means you've got to cut down everything that's posted right now, and then y'all can put it up as it gets accessible. But giving them when people are already slammed with their jobs and they're already busy, and now you're telling them that they have to learn accessibility, which is it's its own job for a reason, right? Like you can't come in here. I can teach you PowerPoint and like Excel in a couple of hours. You're not teaching anybody PDF remediation in an hour. I could take 2 weeks and get you about to where I would want you to be. Then you'd have to practice it. And so you know, it's like you need to come up with a plan and then get their input on the plan is what I would do. I'm not saying you have to, but and it has nothing to do with whatever. In fact, I always am just like, it's tech, it's Fed, it's this. Never it's helping these people. The fact that it's helping people is backdoor, you know, what am I saying? Last priority to everybody else. We care, they don't. And so if you're trying to sell them on an idea, you'll get the feelers. And there are, you know, but in IT, you're already, you know, it doesn't attract feelers, right? Those jobs don't attract feelers just in general. So I avoid all those conversations. I don't have any of them ever. And I'm just like, this is what needs to happen. This is the plan. What do y'all think about the plan? And then I need you to prioritize, and I need you to this, and we need you to do that. And we're here to support you on this, and we're here to support you on this. But if you're, you know, going to go through and do experiences like they used to do at Chris Cole, I went through that with almost an entire training department when I worked at Texas Workforce Commission, and I still had the hardest time getting people to make things accessible. The voc rehab people at Texas Workforce Commission when I worked there were our worst offenders. So it just, and they know, right? It's just take all the feel out of it. Take all the reason out of it. Practical. What do they need to do? How do they need to do it? And then priorities is what I would do. Did you?
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise, I've tried probably all of those attempts. What's the return on investments? What's the risk? What do we do? As a project manager, as a certified project manager as well, I've learned that if you do break things up in manageable tasks or chunks, it goes a lot further. And I think you mentioned the word I was going to lean on, and that's fear. So fear, I always say to them, is, you know, false evidence appearing real, right? And frequently people are afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid they don't know how to do it. It's going to make them look bad if they don't do it right. Right. And so I think we have to also be able to get over some of that fear and allow for some tolerance for mistakes. Because that's the one thing I think that a lot of companies, a lot of banks, a lot of governments, entities, whatever, they're so risk averse that, you know, if you make a mistake, you're going to be held accountable, you know, but you're going to be held accountable if you're not doing it. But you're not going to be held accountable as much if you at least try to do it right. And I think that's really important. Evaluate your risk when you're prioritizing. You know, is it a web page or a website that's being viewed by the majority of people, but it's important information? It may be a small website that has huge implications. An example of that would be investments, stocks, whatever, right? You know, where it's maybe just 5 or 6 pages, whatever, But if you're clicking that button and you don't mean to reverse that mistake or to, deal with that, it's a huge, huge risk for the organization. So when you think about prioritization, think about different factors, different things to consider when you're prioritizing. Consider traffic, consider your user, consider your risk, and from there, determine what your priorities are. Also, don't forget the quick wins. There are a lot of quick wins. There are a lot of things that you could do very quickly that have huge impact. So I think these are just tips that, that can be passed on, and that will build confidence within your organization. Thank you.
I had one more thing to add, Tina, I'm right next to you. This is Deanna speaking. One more thing I would add to Pina's prioritization list is also if you're really looking for like that first step, sometimes it's not necessarily you deciding or like you deciding what the prioritization is. It also could be driven by, oh, like they want to put up this new web page about X, Y, and Z, this really fancy new initiative. They're super excited about it. Everybody's talking about it, and you get in on those conversations. Like that's something that like they're building right now. So like, let me get in and start talking about accessibility. And like for you, that's a great win. Like you're going to get people to start understanding a bit more about the concepts, whether they like it or not, right? Like they will be learning from you in that moment, and then moving on from there, moving on to the next big project. And sometimes it feels like that hurts us as accessibility professionals because like we want to start with that highest priority thing, that thing that's going to impact the most users. But sometimes it's starting with the things that the other people, the people higher up than us, that what they care about right now in this moment is what can help to win some of that buy-in. Yeah. So, yeah.
And I just like to echo what everybody said. People don't have empathy, so you can't appeal to it for the most part. But don't make it personal. So I have to go to the 58 community colleges in North Carolina, and what I do is I say, this is not me. This is not Darren making you do this. It has nothing to do with me. There are rules and reg. This way to your left. Oops. Sorry, to your left. To your left. My fault. Sorry. This is 117. 117. So I don't make it personal. These are the rules. Here's the plan. Here's what has to happen. It doesn't matter if I like it or don't like it. I don't like the speed limit, but I have to comply with it. And then a lot of it is fear. You just have to walk them through. You have to chunk it, walk them through step by step. I'll go in and say, okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to put headings in our Word documents. Just one thing. And then I showed how that'll benefit them. And then once I get them in the car with me on that, let's maybe do something else. Let's talk about hyperlinks, making them a little more descriptive. I do the same thing with web accessibility too, just one sort of thing at a time. And never make it where you, Christine, is the bad guy, right? It's not personal. I always show the scene from The Godfather where he says it's business. It's not personal. And that's what's worked for me. But yeah, appealing to their empathy or wanting them to feel stuff, people suck. So, I mean, it's just.
I completely agree. So the training that we were going to do to show, empathy for people that have disabilities was going to be for the ACT members, the 30 members that we have, to kind of get them fired up, get them motivated. And then for the rest of the 500 people in the agency, yeah, it's like, well, there's going to be
If you're on a deadline, though, this is not the time to train the agency, right? And so, yeah, because it's like, if you're on a deadline, the time is to be as impactful as possible, which means you need the web developers that are doing the public facing, whoever is doing your private facing, that is agency official communication essentially, and then whatever documents are serving as agency official communication, which is a much smaller subset of people than the whole agency of 500. It's also trying to train a whole agency of 500, having prior been at an agency of 4,400 and doing 4 classes a month for 3 years and still not having, then and that was a 5-year, the agency had a accessibility department for 10 years. It's a big, this chunk is too big. You're eating an elephant. So you've got to, but you have to prioritize. And so prioritizing is not training the 500, prioritizing is training that development team, training the PDF people, training whatever. And even then, you're never going to train everybody that makes PDFs to make PDFs accessible. You can train them to make your Word documents. But so it's like, you've got to go in and see what's the most impactful so that you don't get hit by the feds, because this is a Fed requirement right now, not just TAC. And then go from there, right? And so it's not agency, it's small, and then a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger. And then expanding on what a lot of them have already said, and I don't know everybody's names, I apologize. One thing that I have found very helpful is I don't tell everybody the technical, right? Like, I'm going to give you the color contrast analyzer, and I'm going to say, you need to pass these, and you need to add headings, and give you just the very basics of the headings, but I'm not sending you to WCAG, and I'm not sending you these huge testing results, and I'm not sending you whatever, because nobody wants them and nobody reads them and nobody whatever. I'm just going to tell you, hey, in the header of our website, which ours was just fixed, in the header of our website, the focus bar, when you tab through, color doesn't pass contrast. We've got to have that fixed. When we land on this, it expands. It should never expand unless it's selected, right? Things like that. Just very specific. This is what needs to be fixed. How you fix it probably is up to you, but these are the very specific things, not getting super down into the weeds. I don't need you to learn WCAG. I need you to know that if I can't tab through the website, it's inaccessible. So before it ever comes to me, you tab through it. But the whole, it's just, ideal is that every time somebody creates a PowerPoint, a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, it's going to be accessible. It's never going to happen. It's just, it's too hard to reach. So many people don't have the technical skills even to get to that point with Word and PowerPoint, let alone PDF or web, even the people that are doing those jobs. And then you've got turnover and, lack of priority from even their management. And so it's just, coming up with that plan and knocking out those step-by-steps. So.
Yeah, I think though, one of the reasons why we are in this kind of a situation right now and wonder how we can influence a change is that accessibility is not taught in schools. It's not taught in your STEM programs or, computer program. And so when we think about, those people who are starting in accessibility, you are behind the 8 ball, as one would say, because you have regulatory requirements now that, asks you to do this, and you don't have the knowledge of how to do it, right? But it is important to lean on those organizations that are focused on training, who know how to deliver training. And I would suggest think about role-based training very, very closely. Not everybody needs to know everything about accessibility. It's just too overwhelming. If I'm talking to a designer, I'm going to talk to a designer in the things that a designer is responsible to do, and making sure that they get what they need to do or know about accessibility vis-a-vis someone who is a developer or someone who is a tester. Because the WCAG standards, 56 criteria, but nobody understands them, right? But if you say to them, to your point, if you're responsible for color, then it's up to you to make sure that the color is right. If you're responsible for keyboard navigation, guess what? This is your job, right? And then this also ties to accountability. As a person in your group, this is your role. You are now accountable for it. You are responsible for this to happen, right? And I think that, especially if you're kind of reluctant to want to do it, I think it was Darren's point, it's law, right? You got to do it. You have no choice, but you got to hold them accountable as well, right? And celebrate, recognize those who do it well, because too often we're hard on what we can't do right, and we don't recognize what we do right, right?
So the ways that you can hold them accountable is like have it added to performance plans. The problem is you have to get, you have to get buy-in, but then it has to be enforced. You can also like if accessibility training isn't part of your new employee orientation, I would say that helps, but I'd be lying. It doesn't help, but I mean, it's not, you have a check in the box, right? Yeah. Things like that, but it's just, what is that with the fork instead of a spoon bucket where you're in a sinking boat thing? Oh, when you're in a sinking boat and you're spooning with a fork instead of a bucket, that's essentially, I mean, and so the only thing you can do is just clean it. But those things do help, but it would be enforcement too. If you could get the CEO to go in and say, hey, IT, this is the plan and this is priority. So.
I think my experience as a new professional in this field is that it is presented as a new role when one of the things that I've heard throughout this conference that I think is the most striking is that this is not a new role. This is everyone's job, and it already is. It's just something that hasn't been being done. And so I understand that I'm new, and I understand that there are a lot of people in this room that are not new, and that it can be frustrating to consistently be told that this is not important and to have to push back on that. And, I would like to know if there are any sort of techniques to get that higher up buy-in so that this isn't every step of the way kind of banging your head against the wall as opposed to like a top down, we're doing this, and you only have to like redo everything once. Then you're just maintaining. Once the product is close to compliance or in compliance, then you're just kind of maintaining. So I don't know if there are any strategies. I don't know, I don't mean to cut anybody off if there was more, input on that question, but I'm curious to know that.
So one thing I did, I had a college that was they were not buying what I was selling. So I went there and I said, listen, I can be the accessibility police or the accessibility priest, right? They didn't want either one. So what I did was I looked at the org chart and I thought, well, maybe if I can find somebody who can make them do it. So I identified that person on their campus and I just did a charm offensive on that person, which when I do a charm offensive, it doesn't work usually, but I did everything I could to convince that one person. Now they're one of my best colleges because somebody made them do it. And I realized I don't have to convince everybody. I got to convince that one right person. And sometimes that one right person isn't who you think it is. There are people who have a lot of influence in organizations that make people do stuff or people follow, but they don't always have the title. So that's one strategy to think about. Just, step back and look at your organization, how it works, how the people interact with each other. So that's another way to do it, is just find somebody who can kind of make them do it. But never make it about you, right? When I go there, it's not, Darren told us to do that. Darren didn't tell you to do anything, right? This is laws from the state of North Carolina and the federal government. And here's the plan. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to start out slow. We're going to chunk it. We're going to do the foundation. Then we'll put the subflooring in, the floor, and then we'll frame the walls.
My name is Mike Zapata, and I work for City and also a friend of Darren from Access U. And my point was going to be exactly pretty much what he had said about find the folks who are basically the influencers in your company or organization. They may not be management all the time. They might be. They might be the folks that you probably run into in the hallways that they know what else they're doing. And they can be your best advocates for accessibility within the organization. Because like, hey, I've been working with so-and-so, and he's working on this project to make, our apps better, and have that language first about making things better, more improved. Because the word accessibility is a big word, and some people are afraid of big words already. Even if you shorten it down to A and Y, that also seems foreign. Because it's such a weird acronym, personally, that I think. So again, try to think of ways. I know there was a course here earlier, maybe not this year, but at least in years past, about plain language. And I always think of when you're talking to accessibility, talking up accessibility to people who aren't familiar with it, definitely use plain language. To Carmen's point about talk about the things about how do you improve this thing on our website or on our documents, rather than saying contrast, because even contrast might be a foreign concept for some folks. And it's part of our jargon. I mean, frankly, it's part of us being in the accessibility field. It's a jargon term. For some folks, they may not realize what that is, even if they looked it up in the dictionary. And they don't grok it right away. Again, grok's another one that I use. So, but anyway, like I said, just try to be very plain language. Realize that they're starting from zero compared to you. And also kind of work with them as kind of being a mentor to them. I know you say that you're new. Access U is a great place to find mentors here, and if you have a team, maybe they're folks that already have more experience than you, look to them as your mentors. And as you advance along in your journey as being an accessibility professional, try to mentor people up. Be part of your team. They could be say, hey, I had a question about this PDF file. How do I fix it? You give them a few little tricks, and I always gently push people away and say, now spread it around. Spread it around. That's all you need to do. Become that influencer within the company as well. But like to your main point though, try to find those influencers wherever you can. And if they have that power, I think the power is more just how to social engineer people, to borrow a term from information security, there's some people who are really good with other people. They can talk to them. Somehow they can talk to everybody in the world. Everybody's their friend, and they haven't, there's no strangers to those folks. I'm not one of those people, but I try to find those folks and say, hey, I want to be your friend, so you can be the friend of a friend that I refer to get my job done. And I try to help them out in that way. And again, it's kind of a mutual relationship building too. It's all about networking. It's all about building relationships, and it's all about people. So even though we are helping people via our work with accessibility itself, we try to, I think the best way to make that work happen is just by working to people as, people first, not just my boss, the head of that department or that head of that person, or the regulators looking over my shoulder to make sure I get the work done. Just think of it as a people-centric approach, and that'll probably carry you a lot further, even if things get a little rough or dark, because you're serving other people. I think it's more of a service that I'm doing as best as I can. I may not move a mountain today, but maybe over time I will. I've been at it 20 years. I think I've moved it to a couple of meters, but from where I started, I feel like, hey, I've made some progress, so I can be proud of that.
Well, thank you, everyone. That was a fantastic discussion. So thank you for asking the question. And I mean, talking about mentorship, like just everyone jumping in and offering suggestions and their own experiences. And yeah, I really want to second what Mike said about this is a great place to find mentorship. Anywhere, all those people wanting to network on Slack, you could find a mentor there. I just have a quick question for the group, especially for people working in the public sector, state agencies. There is email list that I believe is still run by Marie Cohan. And I found that to be pretty helpful for me in just kind of learning about what's going on with public sector versus private sector. I mean, when I joined that list, I really didn't know anything about public sector accessibility. Does anyone have some insight on, all of the different offerings that come through there? Because sometimes it's a lot of information. Does anyone have any favorites from that email list? I saw people nodding that they're familiar with it. No? Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to hand it off to Sarah in a little bit, but there's an email mailing list that comes out, and it's geared towards public sector digital accessibility professionals in Texas, or anyone who's interested in accessibility, and they have webinars. She shares reports. Yeah. I'm going to hand this to Sarah because I think she knows more about it than I do.
Barely, maybe. One of the things I really appreciate about Marie Cohan and what she's doing through DIR is they have the copycats, which is once a month. There's a topic. Sometimes it'll be everyone send in your questions, and then she'll gear a talk toward that. There's also like she'll have other people come and present, and she'll provide the topic, and it's fascinating. But also she has weekly office hours that she does on Mondays that you can just drop in, and I sometimes go in and just like eavesdrop like a creeper. Sometimes I have questions like on when we were early starting the accessibility stuff, like sometimes it was just me and her, and it would be like, okay, what can I focus on next? So she is a wealth of knowledge, and then she brings other experts in as well that just like I learn something every single time I go. Email her. I'll see if I have a coworker at work. I'll see if I can get that information.
Oh, that's a really good idea. Can we add it to the Slack? I'm on the Slack. I can also look. So if you find it and send it, you can either send it to me, Erica Braverman, or I'll also be looking. It is through the Texas DIR, so the Department of Information Resources. I should have thought of that. I'm like, our resources. So there should be information on signing up there, but definitely that would be a great thing to add to the Slack. We found it. Good. While we're finding that, does anyone else have any other questions, thoughts? Oh, yes.
We kind of went in a different direction. I was actually the one who posed this question for a variety of different reasons. I have been working in a full-time accessibility role for just the past 2 years, so I feel like very new to the space compared to a lot of other folks that are here at the conference. And I'm glad that there are even more new people here. It's always great to connect. I'm gonna start in one direction. I have like lots of other questions based on the original one, but yeah, of mine shared with me was in this community, of course, it's like very welcoming. There's so many great people that you meet. They also like a warning of like that you shouldn't be like connected, like you know what I mean, or like you shouldn't necessarily like be connecting yourself to, and it's so hard, or not like in like a physical, like you know, it's so hard to know at like at a conference like who, you know what I mean, like who those voices are. And let me give like an example. This is like they didn't actually give me any names either, right? So that makes it like this kind of like scary thing of like, okay, like there's lots of great people, but there's maybe other people that like have these very strong opinions, and not everybody is like, you know what I mean, not everybody agrees with them, and so it's really hard to understand like what those opinions are and which ones you should be like really like thinking about strongly, or what is just like someone's like they're just grounded in it for 20 years, like that's their stance. and they're not budging on it. Like there's some folks that I've heard of that like they just like VR to them like as a concept, like they are not interested in thinking about the accessibility of it. And like that's just who they are. But how am I as like a new professional supposed to know that? There's one other piece to it, and I'll hand it off to you. Darren, oh my gosh, I just completely forgot of it. There's one other piece that I wanted to say, which was or I guess like another example of it too, like when I was starting like and have accessibility on my LinkedIn, for example, all of these like PDF remediation vendors like start messaging you, right? And like as a new professional, like I don't know, like you know what I mean? Like I don't know not to message them back and like learn about like what they're doing because I'm just so interested in the field. Like I want to know what's going on. Now I know, like I mean, all you have to do is attend one conference talk and you know everybody's opinion about PDF, right? But and I totally agree with them because now I know more about it. But I think that there's some of these like nuances that's like so hard to figure out when you're like just starting out in the accessibility field. I feel like I started in a weird direction. I didn't explain it. I didn't explain it right, but okay.
I think I got what you were saying, but I always look for people who have humility, right? I went up to David Dauber. I saw him at Access and Higher Ground, and I just said, "Thanks, man." He said, "For what?" I mean, he didn't know me. I said, "I've been ripping you off for years." You know? I said, "You taught me things that I thought I knew, right? I learned a lot from you, even about things I thought I already knew." So I always look for people who, I've been doing it like 12 years. I don't know as much as I should. I always have something to learn. Anybody that's got a hard, steadfast opinion and can't learn anything, you should avoid that. Just in general in life. Not even this is not about accessibility. This is a life lesson, right? It has nothing to do with our job. But if a person can't, make fun of themselves, if they can't, they don't have any humility, just on a personal level, you should never deal with that kind of person at all. So I think that's one thing to look for. I have strong opinions about PDFs, but there's a new PDF initiative that they're using because we do a lot of accessible math development. There's a new initiative to make marked up MathML PDFs. And if that works, right, Adobe's doing it. It's not ready yet, but if that works, my opinion will change, right? Because I'll have new information. But as of right now, I hate PDFs, but that's a different story. So, that's just discernment and looking at people. I mean, if they can't, somebody's that rigid on anything, right? If it's cookies, whatever, that's a problem.
So my first idea is you should start a blog. Yes, you should start a blog journaling your experiences as being new to the field, because then that would help other people that are new to the field. You could even do presentation here every year about what you've learned in year 2, what you've learned in year 3. I will add to that though, from what Darren was saying, there's so much to this field and most people specialize. Like we'll end up working with, say, people that only do web and PDFs. And then I've worked with people that only do InDesign and this, right? Or only this and only that. And so I think another part of it is realizing that you're going to have limitations because nobody can do all the purchasing, all the policy, all the PDF, web, mobile, InDesign, this, that. There's EPUB, the EPUB stuff, there are just so many platforms that then too, I think when you're new to it, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have to learn all this. But really, you just need to pick what you enjoy or what you can make money at, and then go from there, right? Because most people aren't going to have the experience or even the brain power to do all that. Like I don't do mobile at all. And so I attended a bunch of these this week and it was mind blowing and I was glad I didn't do mobile. So, but just, all that. And it's hard when you're new because you're just being bombarded with all this information.
Kind of also to both Carmen and Darren's points about there's so much to learn. And like I said, I've been at this 20 years now. I keep hyping it because, you know, it feels like it's an anniversary for me that I've been married to accessibility for 2 decades. But I'm always learning stuff. And well, I kind of got myself off on an attention there, but part of it is, you know, realizing that no one knows everything. There's always going to be some, like sometimes I'm the smartest guy in the room. I open the door, I'm not anymore. And I'm always wary of people who think that they're always the smartest person in the room, regardless, kind of going with having the opinion. And that's the way it's going to be forever because this industry changes all the time. When I started, mobile was not a thing. The iPhone was not introduced until 4 years after, or rather 2 years after I started on this, you know. And then now we have VR, AR, things, XR. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's coming out technology wise that the standards haven't caught up to yet. So there's still things we have to learn that we have to codify and understand what those things are. But going back to your original question about how do you know who these people are that have these opinions? I would say listen to everybody and then maybe listen to what sometimes other people say about them. Again, taking everything with a grain of salt, because sometimes there might be some professional jealousies going along, some politics going along, because we're all people, we factionalize, you know, there's actually tribes within accessibility, even within the disciplines. You know, there's some folks who think PDFs can be done one way, PDF UA is the best way. Some people think other things are the way to do it. But always kind of just look at everything and kind of use your best judgment, you know. And part of it, really, if you think about it, a lot of accessibility is just using judgment to figure out how does the standard apply for this situation or this platform. And so kind of apply it to yourself as well. Just try to think it's like, well, I want to hear what everybody says, but I'm going to make up my own mind on that. Because, I mean, only you can be in charge of what you're going to want to get into. To what Carmen was saying, like, I started as a web guy. In my current position, I kind of have to be the jack of all trades. I did PowerPoint, and I've been doing PowerPoint here at Access U because my boss at HHS said, well, the person who did PowerPoint last year is retired. You're the new guy. You get it done. That seems to be a thing in my career. I'm the guy. I have to get it done. You know, I didn't ask for it, but it ended up in my lap, and I try to do the best thing. And then I've kept it because I actually like it. My current boss thinks I'm insane because I love PDFs and working on them. Even though I detest the web testing, I can do it well, but I hate it. But it's just the way we are. We have our likes, we have our strengths. You know, there's things we do despite what we're told to do. You know, we have to get the job done. But that's part of the thing. I think I kind of envy you a little bit in the career because in that you have a lot of stuff you don't have to deal with that I know when I started with. There's like things like the marquee tag. I don't know if you guys remember that back in the days when Netscape was a thing. The competing, you know, the competition between Internet Explorer and Netscape as being the two big dogs in the web space. And they had they tried to do their own way of handling the web. And now that's gone. Thanks to, you know, having W3C as a thing, it became a grassroots result, you know, of that. People didn't want to have a company dictating what's going to be the standards. They figured we're going to agree with it together. We came together as a community. And it's grown since then. So again, with the new technologies, there's probably going to be a lot of discussion about it. AI is a big thing right now in terms of like, some people actually hate it. Some people are wary of it. Some people are like open arms to it. You know, it just depends. And so a lot of it's just kind of discernment, you know, figure out what you want in your, you know, in your career, what you're willing to get with. There's some battles you're going to have to fight that you don't want to, but kind of keep that as a, you know, there's some people out there that I still look up to, like Carl Groves, Paul Faulkner, you know, folks like that I agree with, I would say maybe 99% of the time. So I defer to their opinions more often than not. But at some point, you'll probably be that person that somebody looks up to, even if it's only within your little, what I call your local galaxy, you know, at your work, or even the influence of people you've met at conferences and so forth. They'll look to you as like, oh, she's been in this 2 years. She knows more than me because I've only been in it 1. And I always tell people too, just because I say I've been here at 20 years doesn't mean I know 20 years. There's stuff I've forgotten and I get reminded of every so often, you know. But that's what I love about conferences like this. I get to see things I've seen before, or maybe I see things in different ways because somebody said, hey, check this out. Oh, I've been aware of it for a while, but I really don't know it. And it's helpful to learn. So, you know, again, kind of like a long way to answer, just you got to make up your own mind and trust yourself. And that's probably the best advice I can give you for that. So.
Thank you. I think the other word I would add to that, well, the information. Information is power, right? So, knowledge is power, right? So, be aware I forget your name, sorry, Michael, as Michael said, I think and keep up to date with what's changing and what's evolving. But I think authenticity is the word I often use when I mentor others. And always tell people, be authentic about who you are and what you know, what you don't know. Because your authenticity is what's going to build trust in the business. And if if people say they're going to do something and they're not going to do it, or they're not going to deliver on it, or they deliver crappy because they said they knew and they didn't, that follows you. And that's when you start seeing the tribes forming and the people talking to. I have to say, to Michael's point and to Darren's point, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've come to a lot. And this morning, yesterday in one of the sessions, to your point about in this community, we love each other, but there are people that are mean, that are not so kind. I don't know if it's because I wasn't affected by it directly, but to me that really struck a nerve, right? Because I'm thinking, what do you mean? What do you mean we're not friends? What's that all about? Right? But the reality is it does happen, and I think as networks grow, you're going to see some of that. So just be aware, but if you're always authentic, if you're kind, and you do what you say you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. I guarantee you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I had like one comment to add to that too. I think actually, so I thought of Carmen, the blog idea, something like along that line. Like I'm very active on LinkedIn already, and I just was like, I could just do like LinkedIn posts, and there is a lot of meanness in this community on LinkedIn that I feel like I see, and that has stopped me from posting because I'm so new. Like, you know what I mean? Like people have so many opinions. Like, I think that's just like a social media issue in general, right? I don't think that's like, yeah, it's not like just like confined to this community, but who I follow on LinkedIn, like my whole following is the link on LinkedIn is the accessibility, disability, inclusion community. So like in my mind, it doesn't make sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's supposed to be, or like was sold as a very welcoming community, which like in my mind makes sense, right? Like that's what we're trying to do is like inclusion work. And there are, I mean, like like as you all are saying, like I have discerned there are voices that I now know, like, okay, like I have to take everything that they say with either a grain of salt or just be like conscious of like they're coming from their own perspective, and like that's their experience that they're bringing into this, and they've been doing it a heck of a lot longer than me. And so I mean, I've thought, like, you know what I mean, and like that it like every day, like I literally, when I tell you I'm a spreadsheets person, I have spreadsheets of posts that I would post online. I haven't got myself to do it yet, you know.
That was useful advice. I'm gonna repeat that for the folks on Zoom because that's very important. Don't accept every invitation you get on LinkedIn. Do not do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. And again, going back to the idea of like, there's a whole lot of folks out there that you can learn from. I wouldn't limit myself to just LinkedIn. And I frankly think LinkedIn is basically Facebook with a suit on, which is why I'm not really on it hardly at all. Maybe I check it once a year. But, again, go to different platforms, go to Reddit, again, safely, because Reddit can be a cesspit too sometimes, depending where you go. But again, always be, just be wary of what people say. You can also go to maybe the podcast. You can go to YouTube channels or, stuff on Instagram that people may talk about. I kind of think just try everything, and don't get locked into that. That's kind of where the tribalism starts, when they lock you into a platform. And going back to Darren's point, that applies to everything, because I've seen people fight over cookies. on Facebook, cook like my recipe's better than yours, just because it's the nature of that platform of kind of, I think, generating outrage and fear just to drive eyeballs to the content, which my thing, if I was going to drive eyeballs to content, it would be through humor, but I'm not that great a comedian. So, but it seems like that seems to what these platforms are based on, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so I try to get away from that because it just feels like a bad vibe anyway, So, but one thing I was going to say also, because places like that also are really good in terms of bullying you in terms of what you don't know, and really hammering you, try to make you think that you are an imposter. Because I've seen that sometimes with folks who are starting, they think, well, I don't know anything, so do I even know what I'm talking about? And I would say, no, be confident in what you know. Get your confidence from your competence of the things you do know. Even if it doesn't seem like a lot, that should drive you on. Because I think everybody in this room, even like I said, the two guys I look up to, like Paul Faulkner and Carl Groves, I'm pretty sure at some point they probably had that idea of like, do I really know what I'm talking about? Do I have to just bullshit my way through things so people still think I have this image of who I am or this image I've made up for myself? So look through that, try to look through the emperor's clothes, I guess you could say, but try to go as best as you can to find a variety of opinions. And then, like I said, it's up to you to make the choice of what you think is right or wrong, or you could be right for the moment. To Darren's point, you could change your mind. That's perfectly fine too.
I wanted to add to what Michael was saying about not knowing everything. We hired someone new on our team in the fall, and she's a way better web tester than I'll probably ever be, right? Like, that's fine. I don't specialize in web, whatever. But one of the things that my brain works by memorizing things. It just does. And so I would be talking to her about something, and I'd be like, WCAG this, whatever. And she, came back to me one day and was like, memorize. I'm like, no. I have it on shortcut. And if I need to go any further down, into it, but just if you think that all the people working here, even after 10 or 20 years, have all this stuff memorized, very rarely. We have good portions of it, the stuff that I use the most. If you ask me to rattle off how to do complex lists in a PDF document, I can tell you off the top of my head exactly what those tags are going to look like, right? Or a table of contents or something like that. But if you're getting down into certain weeds or something that I don't do very often, you want me to rattle off this stuff, all the things that tooltips have to be, I can give you about 3. And then I'm going to have to go look up the rest. And so don't think that, oh my gosh, I have to have everything memorized. You need to know where the information is. And you need to know that unless you are getting it from the horse's mouth, then it could very well be wrong. There have been plenty of places that I have seen training materials and blog posts and things like that the information was flat out wrong. Null alt text in Word documents is one that I can think of that at least has not worked since 2015 to put quote space quote in a Word document to make it an image decorative. But I still see it to this day. So, if you're not sure, test, throw their screen reader on, ask somebody that's a user, whatever, but nobody knows everything. And so don't think that whatever you do know, as long as you've tested it and you know right now, whatever version of this you're using, this is how it works, then you know. And so, it's disappointing because I know that there are a lot of hurdles, but I feel like there are a lot of hurdles in all jobs. When I was a trainer, there were a lot of hurdles in training. When I was this, there was this, there's always something. But I'm really sad about the LinkedIn thing. I really it hurts my feelings. What about the mentors, the bringing new people in question? That we
Like
came
into
in
the
for?
space. Oh yeah, I guess I don't know here. I guess we can go back maybe to the original question. I don't know what it was off the top of my head. Let's see. One moment. Oh. Okay, so our original question, I feel like I'm taking your job. Our original question that I had posed was, how do we prepare, invite, and welcome new accessibility professionals into the field? Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing is you welcome them in and say, I'm glad you're here. Right? And I tell people all the time, and I got this from a series of books. I said, there's 4 sentences that you're going to hear me use and that you'll use that maybe will help you in life. They're, I don't know, I'm sorry, I was wrong, and I need help. I said, so we're always going to use those with each other. And you be authentic. I tell them, look, I'm going to make mistakes, but these are the things that we're going to do. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to try and train you as best I can. I still learn. And I always tell this story to any new person that comes into the shop. I say, I've made probably 5,000 accessible Word documents. But anytime I go to a conference, if somebody speaks accessible Word, I go. And I learn something almost every single time, whether it's a new analogy or a new way to put it. One lady said, well, think of the accessibility checker as like a screen reader checker, not an accessibility checker. And I went, bam, that was a light bulb in my head, right? Just phrase. So it's how you welcome people into the fold. And you tell them, we're all going to make mistakes. We're going to do this together. We're going to do the best we can. I'm going to support you every way I can. And, that's all you can do. And I always tell them, since we're responsible for the 58 colleges, we're a good taco shop here. Taco. And not make people do stuff accessible that they're supposed to do. What we can do is make sure that what we do is the very best work we can do. Because that's ultimately all we have control of. And as we go through that process, we're going to travel to access you. Each time we're going to learn from people. Mind. Try to get better at what we do. And then go from there. How you win, it's how and it's relationship. All 50 call somebody on the phone. So you do what you can do. Make sure your taco right. The sushi talking at like any sushi or tacos. So control what you can control, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I was just going to say very quickly, sorry, but you can't use I'm sorry. That's a Canadian thing. Sorry. But thanks. See, it's about laughing. Yeah. It's also about finding venues that you're comfortable. As a start, someone who's starting in accessibility, what are some venues that you're comfortable? There are a lot of accessibility chapters that are popping up here left and right, which are a lot easier to start a conversation sometimes than going to a CSUN as an example. No knocking in a CSUN, but it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot for some of us who've been there many, many times, but so you've got to find what you're comfortable with, and not be afraid to ask questions. Right? Not be afraid. I think the other thing too is as someone who's starting, it's good to always find someone who can help you by meeting you where you are, right? Because and you may not know where you are. You may have no idea, right? But have that conversation once you know kind of I really don't know where to start. Like if you tell me you don't know where to start, we're gonna have that conversation. But if you tell someone I don't know where you start, and like Carmen said, they're gonna throw WCAG at you, you're not in the right place, right? And it's only going to overwhelm you. It's only going to make things more complex for you. So, small groups are good. Chapters, allies, or whatever you call them, A11Y, chapters, universities, schools, if you're working, there are organizations, sometimes you have employee resource groups. Great source of information and support, right? So, yeah.
When you're talking about introducing new, people to the field, I think that when I've seen it, it's mostly organically, right? Like I feel like all of us just kind of, most of us, probably not everybody, ended up in it, right? Like I fell into it through training, right? Y'all fell in it through IT because you're a professor, things like that. And so a lot of times, I think if you're just a good representative, people that are interested are going to follow into that, right? Like the last team I was on, we had somebody from I was from the training department, somebody else came from the training department, somebody was a developer, then somebody from HR came, and it was, that team was so willing to bring people in and train them up that we were able to poach from, other areas. So that helps a lot. And then, you can just, as long as you are enthusiastic about it, and I'm not, you don't have to be poly cheerleader, whatever, just, practical and personable and, all the things you already are, people are going to naturally gravitate to it as much as you can. And then, like the people talking before me were already saying, you just support people as much as you can. And then it just happens, right? So it's not, I think the getting people into the field, I feel like it's not as much of a concern to me as it is, I want to see people succeed when they get here. So.
Okay, this is Deanna speaking. So I think my like concern around this is that you said like a lot of people have gotten into this. I have been finding like that is definitely the truth. I actually haven't met anybody who has been like was actively seeking accessibility role. That's my story actually. So like I actively was seeking an accessibility role, and so I'm worried that there's a community of people out there that are actively would actively come into these roles, and there is no opportunity for that. There is no pathway for that. Don't get me wrong, I've been in the disability inclusion space my whole entire life. I have disabilities myself and have been very involved in the space. Like disability ERGs are like really in the workplace is like where my experience started. But I moved from an HR role and just made a personal move across the country. And I knew I wanted my next role to be in accessibility. What field I was in, what industry I was in, I had no idea. I didn't know that JP Morgan has a 60-person accessibility team, and Macmillan Learning, where I'm at now, has a 2-person accessibility team, right? Like I didn't know all the nuances of all this. I just knew I wanted to work in accessibility. And that journey, it took me 8 months to find a role. And honestly, like now learning more about this field, like I am amazed I'm so grateful that they took a chance on me because I'm super passionate about this field. I know I want this to work in this field for a very, very long time. And I'm worried that there are either people coming out of college right now, there's a lot more disability studies programs. There's a lot more human computer interaction programs. People are interested in this field and they don't have a path to be able to get into it. There's also no roles, right? Like the fact that I even found my role, you know what I mean? I literally was just waiting for that role. I was applying to all sorts of things. I wasn't qualified for any of them. And don't get me wrong, everybody has the imposter syndrome, right? But I don't even necessarily knew I was qualified to do the role that I actually got. When I got it, I learned it really, that's who I am. I believe that anyone can learn this stuff. I fundamentally believe that of all humans. And so I am a fast learner, and I think that that's what they saw in me is this drive to be able to do it. And so, yeah, so I'm very lucky. And so I'm just curious, I don't know if other people are seeing that because I actually have not met anybody else who's had that experience.
And thank you, Deanna. This is back to Erica. So first of all, really quick housekeeping. I promised y'all a break and I didn't give one. So I think this is what we're gonna do. Or actually, I'm doubling up here. I got this. Sorry if that was weird on the Zoom folks. Feel free to take a break if you'd like to at any point. The coffee shop closes at 3, y'all, and it's getting on 2:15. So if you need a caffeine hit, that's just a PSA from me. So feel free, but how does everyone feel in the room? Are you feeling like you want to just kind of keep going and people take breaks as needed? Okay, this is a good flow of conversation. I hate to stop here. I actually do have some thoughts on that though, and I'm really glad you brought that up. So I'm not that old. I'm getting older. We all are, but I feel but I feel so I actually came from K-12 education where things can move pretty darn glacially. And so coming into an industry like accessibility technology that moves very fast, you know, I could start feeling old 2 years into a career because I remember old things that are now old, and that was kind of jarring. But all that is to say, when I started, I did a UX certificate program in 2019, not knowing about accessibility at all. And in my program, we had 1/2 of one page and one textbook on accessibility, and it was a scanned PDF. So I don't even know if the information was accessible. And so I remember emailing my professor and saying, I heard about this accessibility thing, and I know we had that little bit. Is that, you know, do people get jobs in this? And he said, I think you should do, if you like that, I think you should do that. We are going to need this. And I said, okay. And, you know, off I went. I ended up in Knowbility by total accident, which is a whole other story. I was not thinking that was going to happen to me, and it launched me. But, you know, kind of coming from a very accidental route in 2019. And then this past semester, I was an adjunct professor teaching accessible UX and getting to meet a lot of the new generation. And even, you know, 6 years, it's a whole generation, I feel like. And I talked to a lot of new grads, recent graduates who say, I want an accessibility role. I want an accessibility and UX role. And I'm thinking, I had no concept of that in 2019. I'm trying to look through these job postings with these students, or just to understand what my students are looking at. And this is how I see it. More universities are fortunately starting to catch on. More boot camps are starting to at least touch on accessibility. More new people are entering the industry with, or starting their careers with a better concept of this. But those job postings are largely getting written by people who were there when accessibility was hanging around the edges. And so the definition, people are kind of looking at 2 different definitions of this. And truly, I think a lot of jobs where people can make a big impact in accessibility are not titled accessibility roles. That can be a really big disconnect, especially for someone starting their career. They don't have a lot of experience looking for jobs to begin with. They're a new grad. And so they're going off what's in the posting title. They're really, they don't have that life experience of what fits into a technical career. And so I think that one of the things that might be able to support that is going back to that mentorship and hearing from people who ended up, whether it was accidental or coming at a career with a very different intention. I want to work in ed tech. I want to work in digital publishing, journalism with a digital component. And I ended up in accessibility and helping people get directed to those other spots, you know, but that involves kind of finding that mentor and also bringing those lived experiences of I ended up with this job to those educational programs. I'd like to see more industry people connect with ed programs if they can. Yeah. Oh, I see. Mhm.
So I misunderstood your point earlier. You're meaning like you can't just go to school for this, essentially, right? Like I can go and be a web developer. I can go and you know to boot camps and things like that. But if somebody chooses this as a career, it is a hard, right? I've had people ask me before, like, okay, you know, you're doing well in your career. How do I transfer to this, right? And I've never been able to give them a good answer. But I think too, some of that is going to be, you know, the boot camps or the classes or the programs aren't going to pop up until there are enough jobs to support having, you know, people come and pay for this, right? Pay to take it, pay to say that this is going to be my career, so I want to do this. Certification, even though IAP certifications have been around for a few years now, they're still not widely required or adopted. And so, and, you know, some of them require experience to, you know, like for web accessibility, at least you have to submit experience. And so it's hard to even say, okay, I can take this class and at least get a familiarization and then go do that. So you're right. There's a lack there. And there's not really, I mean, there's 508 trusted tester, but man, if you do that without knowing anything, so yeah.
Here it is.
Thank you. I am so glad this came up because coming into this conference, I wear a number of different hats. IAP is one of them. IAP is a sponsor of this conference. And one of the reasons why we really felt strongly about coming, and we don't sponsor a lot, we go to a lot of conferences, we don't sponsor a lot of conferences. But one of the reasons we felt very strongly about sponsoring this conference is because we are very, very seriously looking at what career path could and should look like. We know we have certifications, but we know the certifications we have are it's just a drop in a big bucket. And it's not for everyone. There are people who come into this profession by choice. Most of us, as we said, myself included, did not come in it by choice. It just so happened, right? So we want to know, I really want to hear from this next generation, those of you who are working in academia, what could that path look like? What do we need in that path? Knowing that, like, I know that there are universities in Canada, and some in the US, some in Ireland, I think, that have, inclusive, digital inclusive and accessibility programs. Not everybody's going to be privy to go to those, through those studies either, right? So I really would love to get some insight from you, from a group of people, and it could be a takeaway. I don't care. If you want to do this with me, you can email me. You can join me at IAAP. We really want. This has really been our topic right now. Is how do we create a path for those individuals who have to do accessibility as part of a current job that is not accessibility, and for those who want to continue to grow into what we call emerging accessibility leaders, right? And I think those are two very different paths, right? But we want to know what it is that, and even the point about the 2 and 3 year certification or experience to write the WAS as an example is in question right now, because we kind of say, yeah, okay, so we understand that, to be a specialist, you have to have some theoretic knowledge, you have to have some experience. I mean, that you got to have the experience behind it. But you get there. Right? So you get there by getting these learning little chapters or little things one at a time, and then you get badges, and X number of badges will get you a year. Like, what's the path? And I'm, I'm just like, this is something that I came to the conference to kind of get my head around as well. So I'd love to hear from all of you, any of you, about your thoughts of good ideas that I can bring back and say, hey, think about this as an example. Anyone? Nobody wants to bite now? That I shushed everyone. We don't have all the answers, right? We don't have all the answers. We need you to tell us so that we can develop programs that can help you get there, right? Sorry, Erica. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I understood the question correctly. So you're really thinking, what between these two pathways of people who sort of fall in the
Mhm.
accessibility trapdoor, and then people who intentionally go looking for, like, how do you support both of those? Or
Yeah, there are different paths. We acknowledge that there are different paths people will take into accessibility, right? You either do it by choice or you fall into it by default, right? Right. And even companies are coming to us and saying, organizations are saying, can you give me a job description for an accessibility, whatever. We don't have any. We don't have any.
I can give a response to that piece of it. I know that actually Teach Access, they have a great database of job descriptions for accessibility roles, all sorts of accessibility roles that they like as you can take that information and make it more customized to your organization and like what your needs are. But like I have personally used it to hire someone before and it was extremely helpful. Oh.
We can't get, is it
Teak, wait, I sure hope Teak actually. Oh, okay. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pete. I told you there'd be
Yeah.
excitement in this session. No, Teach Access is there, but Pete is gone, and they also had some stuff too, and they're, sorry. Apologies.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
worries.
So yes, but are they, is that, are those jobs, let's take a look at them. Are they, what we want them to be? Knowing what we know today, knowing where we are heading with AI and whatnot, how relevant are they, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like I don't have an answer to either of your questions. It's something I will need to like think about a bit more. And I don't think that I think that it's an interesting approach in both sides. New professionals and like very established professionals need to be in the room because I've actually asked several people that I like consider mentors in the field of like, okay, like what do I do next year? Like I'm like someone who wants to like learn, grow all the time. I've taken all sorts of like LinkedIn learning classes. I've done my CPAC. I've done like, I've done all sorts of these like different courses, but there's always, I know that there's so many directions. Like you were saying, like I have no I'm a project manager right now. So like there is no specialty of mine that I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm directed towards mobile or web accessibility, anything like that. I don't necessarily know that that's the path. Like I know that you all were saying like find what you're good at and like I don't know that that's necessarily the path for every, you know what I mean, for everyone in the space, but I mean maybe I haven't been here long. You know what I mean? I haven't been doing this long enough to know that, but I think there are pieces where I'm like, oh, I really would like to learn like semantic HTML better. I do not have a developer background. Like where do I start with that? And like I can take all sorts of like LinkedIn courses, but like at the end of the day, if my role doesn't have that, like I'm not practicing these skills. So like I will never be able, the trajectory I'm going, I will never be WAS or however, I don't know, WAS or whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, where you're at now is actually, I think, a good place to be because I run into a lot of product managers that don't know anything about accessibility. And that kind of is one of the more common battles I have to fight with more than say developers or testers or somebody like that, even designers who may not be familiar with accessibility. Kind of like, I think somebody raised a point about how there's an old way of looking at things, like how some of these descriptions that you see on websites, I don't think those are necessarily even written by people who are even within IT. They tend to be written by HR folks Because when I was switching careers, I mean, not careers, employers, I was with the state of Texas. And then after COVID, I said, well, I want to go into public sector. And I started my job search. And I realized if I just looked up the word accessibility on most of the major job boards out there, I got a lot of stuff on there that had nothing to do with accessibility, just with the word alone. You know, you would think maybe that would maybe include like physical accessibility, like, you know, ramps and things of that nature, that kind of compliance stuff. Not even that. It was just more like accessibility to our parking lot or accessibility to our cafeteria on site, things like that. And so I had to fine tune my search. But I realized at that point, for going to the larger question about how do we bring people into the field, I had to go by the term of like, well, if this employer knows about WCAG, then that might get me closer to where it is. But I also was gambling on the idea that whoever was hiring had an influence in the description that was going to get posted somewhere. HR folks typically did not. And sometimes I'd have to look for positions just because of the area. Say like I wanted to be remote, but I want to stay here in Austin. So I had to sift through lots and lots of pages just because it happened to have something in Austin that was remote and maybe had the word HTML in there or something that was tangentially related to accessibility, what I was looking for. And so I can kind of imagine for, well, for me, everybody's a kid because, you know, I'm 52. So I always think anybody younger than me is a kid. Everybody older than me is old. So, you know, my parents are old. They're always going to be old. And then my nephews are always going to be kids, even though they're now grown-ups. So, you know, they can drive cars, they can sign contracts. They're all cool. But that's just my mental thing. But I realized I had a conversation with, I forget your name, I'm sorry, Miriam Mai, at lunch earlier. And she was talking how she just graduated from UT with a master's and she was looking to get into the field. And I was like, and it made me think, I was like, well, if I was in her shoes right now, just got out of school, trying to figure out where I'm going to go, to your question, there really isn't anything out there that says this is where you're going to go to get an accessibility. If I think I've discovered an affinity for it, how do I get into that space? You know, and I think I think there needs to be a poll out there asking like, how many people intentionally got into accessibility? And I kind of think maybe it's 1%, maybe even fraction of that. Because I know I got thrust upon me when somebody said, well, you're the web guy here. You take care of Section 508 stuff, compliance. And I've heard that that question lots of times. You know, I mentored someone when I was at Texas HHS who started in basically our Family Protective Services Agency. And she had been a manager at that level, at that agency for quite a while. And she ended up adopting a lot of web stuff as part of her general duties because she kind of figured, well, I'm the supervisor. I may as well take care of this job since my caseworkers are doing all the other work that we really need to do. And so she pivoted from that into accessibility. And so I and Mike Moore and several of other people on our team brought her up because she did not come from a technical background whatsoever. We had to kind of give her a crash course on what HTML was about. We were developing some test cases for HTML for every single element. And I figured, well, here's a quick way for you to learn every single element there is in HTML. Shadow me on this project and you'll get that knowledge, which is a very rare, I think, case for most people to even do that, to even look at all the elements and figure out what they are. So I think in that sense, she's better off than a lot of folks, even developers that I've run into. But again, it's a rare case. It was just happenstance. So to your question earlier about like, how do we get folks in, you know, the new generation, the ones that are going to be the leaders of the future in say 20 odd years, they're going to be able to look back, how they're going to get in there. And I kind of wonder about that. And I'm not close to any kind of educational sources to other than Access U of just offering, you know, my knowledge to people like yourself that I run to, you know, that happen to be younger than me, maybe have less experience time-wise in the field. I figure I try to share what I can. And that's about the most that I can think of I can do. But maybe there's more I can do as well, because there's several. Who raised first? I'll go with you, then go around this way, I guess. There you go. Gotcha, right there.
Oh, you mentioned project management. Who did? You did project management?
Yes.
So 10 years ago, I wrote to PMI. And I asked PMI to add accessibility in their modules. The response I got 10 years ago was that accessibility was not mature enough. So But I agree that there are places that we can inject accessibility that are not your traditional project management. If you don't have accessibility in project management, I don't know how products can be accessible. I'm sorry. So here's another ask from me to you all. I would love to continue to solicit and PMI to start building accessibility in their what do they call it? Their book, the PM book, the PEM book, right? The PEM book, because they wouldn't listen to just Pina. So, anyone else?
So I think back to what IAAP could provide that is a gap right now is, if you look at, and not, I think that the CPACC, the WAS, the ADS have their place, but I think that what's lacking is there's no type of like boot camp type of course for people that want to get into accessibility, and where you're actually learning the hands-on, you're learning web testing, or you're learning documents, or you're learning this where you're actually coming out with skills that can be applied immediately after you finish the course. There's nothing like that out there. Yes, there's some LinkedIn Learning courses that are amazing. Again, Trusted Tester, which I actually really like, it's really well done, but you have to have a basic knowledge to really even understand Trusted Tester. There needs to be something that starts from the basics and comes up. And then somebody could go, oh, this is actually a career. I'm not sure how many people are actually going to take anything like that, knowing that there aren't a ton of accessibility jobs out there, though. But even, if you're talking about supporting people that have already, have fallen into it, then I feel like it's almost like you would go with, role-based almost, or specialties, because web developers fall into it. They already have a background in web development. They don't need the HTML, CSS, stuff like that. They know that. We need to focus on web. We need to focus on the, and then, but, and there are some places I think that are already a little bit saturated. Procurement's pretty much covered if you're federal or state. I think depending on your state, those things are covered in courses. But you can't, the problem is if you're going into a new job and you can't get experience, there are two options, right? Like OJT or class. There's no class that is going to give you any more than LinkedIn Learning. Well, I can't put just LinkedIn Learning for the actual job I'm doing on and get hired, right? Oh, yeah, and so it's not a bachelor's degree or even that. And I think that's what's missing is something like that, where you can actually just say, somebody taught me this and I successfully applied it well enough to earn a credential.
I just want to say that like my experience has been kind of similar but kind of opposite to Diana. So I come from a computer engineering background, so I understand the tech side of things. And then I got into UX, so I'm kind of in the middle of everywhere. So I just get confused as to which direction I should choose, because I'm into UX, but I would really love to do something in accessible UX. But again, there are not many roles, and the ones that are out there need like 4 or 5 years of experience. And as a recent grad, I don't have that, even though I've worked in multiple internships into accessibility as well. But still, that's not enough. So how do I set my foot into the industry? I think you have to.
I do, but I was put this one off while I put this one on just to, yeah. But I also want to answer you because, and I obviously spent a little more time with you than most people in this room because we worked on some projects together. But kind of speaking more directly to you, but also in a larger sense, I think that one of the things that is challenging with thinking about the sort of incremental slide into accessibility is that, you've really done a lot more than most people around accessibility. I've seen your work and it's fantastic. it's not a full, like, oh, I had, a year of experience with this company, but it's a significant set of skills that you've spent a lot of time practicing and applied it to a real life situation that, I think would sit really well in a lot of roles. Maybe they say accessibility in the job title, maybe they don't, but the accessibility skills would benefit. And I think that this is hard, and it would be big and messy to do this at a big scale, but I think so much of the conversation that we're having here is really a lot of more day in the life of, well, this is how I got here, and these are the questions I have to answer, rather than a granular, now you're ready for accessibility. We don't really, there's a lot of people who get very far into accessibility before they get a piece of paper or a certification that says, and that is very contrary to a lot of people's typical educational experience, because what do you do at the end of your degree? You get the paper that says, now you're ready. And coming from education where, or any field where the certificate is everything. I mean, talk about non-technical, I came in with a Spanish degree. And I was a Spanish teacher, and I had, a Michigan teaching certificate. If I had gone into a classroom without that sheet of paper and started teaching children Spanish, it would be a real problem. But when I started working in accessibility with not really a lot of credential, people had no problem. Can you help us with our WordPress site? Can you help us with this PDF? Can you help us with our form? Can you do this training? And, I had a hard time. I mean, I think we all still can find imposter syndrome everywhere, but just thinking, I have no credential in this field and people think that I can help. But it was really that I just knew a little bit more than the existing team, and we were kind of building that knowledge together. So I think that one of the important pathways, not that we should move away from credentials and certificates, but just kind of recognize little bits of project and little bits of experience, and where those can fit in, rather than waiting for official recognition to get started. And I think that is what keeps a lot of people thinking that they can't do accessibility, because they see this as a big body that maybe they haven't touched. This reminds me of a conversation I had at a small business meetup. This was some years ago in San Antonio, and a woman asked me what I did. She was one of the leaders of this group. And I told her, and she said, oh, I don't know anything about web accessibility. That sounds so, wow, more power to you. I'm not a computer person. We're talking, and she said, but I guess I have done some related things. And she starts telling me that she works for a bank, and she had basically taken on the entire accessibility leadership program for making sure that when they had interviewees with disabilities and people on the staff with disabilities, she had become the go-to person for your workspace. Are you getting access to the trainings? Are you able to communicate with people on your team? Are you getting the information? And she had spent years building this whole structure for her company. And I'm thinking, you know more than I do, but it just was presented in a different way. And she didn't come in to do this. She started in, I don't know what her original title was, but she had just created this and become incredibly successful, and was now like the person. And, that's the kind of stuff that I think I'd like to see more recognition of, and more acknowledgement that even if you've just done a little spot project, you're doing accessibility. Once you start it, or once you start thinking about it and talking about it, you're doing it, paper or not. And kind of going back to some of the pitfalls of, engaging on LinkedIn or Reddit, I think another factor is that those stories are kind of hard to tell in the short form social media. It's difficult to take that kind of ongoing, developed over time, little bits of, well, is this accessibility? Is that accessibility? That's kind of a more of a mentorship and kind of discussion like we're having here. I think this is great, rather than, yes, here's a post that tells me what I'm doing is legit and accessible. So it's hard to do that in this digital age, I think. I'm going to hand the mic to you.
Thanks for that insight. I think that what I'm kind of hearing with regards to your specific question is that your knowledge of accessibility practices and things of that nature in this realm can be a major selling point that isn't on anyone else's CV. And that when people, and I would like anyone's insight that has hired people in this space or in a different space that ended up being an accessibility role, if that would be something that puts you kind of ahead and a part of an entire pool of applicants because you're the only one that's talking about it, and you actually do have a lot of knowledge that a lot of people, to your point with the person that developed the whole accessibility program but not on the web, thinks, oh, well, I don't have any knowledge of this. And so that could be like a very valuable thing, as opposed to not really knowing. Because what I've heard throughout this conference is this is not a specific job. This is a part of everyone's job, kind of.
So echoing your last comment, is it a skill or is it a profession? How many other examples of jobs or things that we do can we think of fall in this pattern and that we can learn from? Because certainly accessibility is not the only thing that, people do and don't necessarily do because they have a degree, right? And is there an appetite? Is there really an appetite to continue to forge forward with this as its own profession? Or is it really about skills building? I'm being a provocateur.
I think we might be looking at this. Here's another way to look at it, maybe. Maybe get a job as a developer and bring the accessibility to the organization. You know what I mean? And that'll give you maybe a heads up. Yeah, that's a skill, but maybe we can make it a profession sort of organically, if that makes any sense. And just one observation, this isn't political. If Donald Trump doesn't have imposter syndrome, none of you should have it. I'm just saying. You put the work in and you can do the work. There's always going to be gaps in, what you know. And sometimes it's best to lean into stuff that you're maybe not good at. That's sort of another way to look at it. But if you can just get a job as a developer and say, oh, by the way, I'm gonna do some semantic HTML. We're gonna do code this way. A lot of times if you make it, this is how we do things, it doesn't become an issue, right? It's like in your relationship, if your wife never allows it, it's never a problem for her, is it? Right? Because she never allowed it in the first place. So that's just another way to look at it.
So I want to play devil's advocate a little bit about what you were saying in the career versus skill thing. One, I think that like business writing and just general design skills, this is something that everybody should have at least a basic, right? If alt text, give me alt text and headings and some simple tables. and that will take us so far, and so then it's, but I think that there's always going to be room for professional designers, professional writers, professional accessibility people. And so I think it's actually both, right? And so then it's identifying who wants to have this as a career, and then them have the ability to make it a career, especially starting out, which I had never even thought of because I came to it so much later in my career. This is career 3 for me. And then that's just not available. And so then I wonder, now that I'm thinking about the fact that it's hard for newer people to get into this, which, I hate it for y'all because the whole early 20s starting out in your career thing is just hard anyway, right? Like getting that foot in the door, just whoosh. But if it were available, if something were available, would there be more jobs? Because there would be more awareness, because there would be, it would be out there and more people would be bringing it into the jobs that they get. Even if they didn't get an accessibility job, they got a developer job and they had an accessibility certification because they had gone to some boot camp and this, and like, would it be, instead of, putting the cart out there and hoping the horses come to drag it, would it be that you're putting the horses there and you're going to get carts? I don't know. That's a bad analogy, but you know what I mean? Like I, I just feel like, I wonder if there was something available, if more people would come to it, because then it looked like a more legitimate career choice, along with maybe getting in partnerships with some of the major like coding boot camps and things like that, where where people that were interested in development, then they could come here. And I mean, even UT has the like the community classes and things like that, the continuing education classes, all those things, y'all, I would teach, so there's so many things out there that I think, are avenues that have not been explored that could be offered to people that are looking for jobs, that want to build their resume more.
Going back to the question about whether this is a profession or just a skill set, one thing that fascinates me aside from accessibility is information security. I listened to like 3 different podcasts about that. And I think if I were to pivot away from accessibility, that's where I would go next, because I see a lot of parallels between that. There's a lot of folks that developed like their hacking skills when they were like teenagers. Somebody gave them a computer. They wanted to get into a website that they shouldn't be in, and they figured out a way to get in there. And or they may have gone to a camp and they got, some skills available. Maybe they've gone to hackathons and things like that. But none of that goes to a resume. They may have skills to, be able to secure or harden the network, but they don't have that certification from an institution that says you are a professional in this trade. And I kind of feel like accessibility has that same kind of thing. We are parts of different things. I think there's also the parallel that people don't really think about accessibility and information security until a problem happens. Usually it's a breach on that side. Here it's on, we got sued. What are we going to do? Kind of like the original question we had from the person who left was, we've got this thing we got to get done. Somebody's coming down on us. That's usually when accessibility becomes a question or a thing in some managers' eyes. And same thing with security. It's like, oh, we got breached. How are we going to stop it? How are we going to engage our, our customers that got their information stolen? So I kind of feel accessibility has that same vibe right now as right. But that's what I'm saying. Accessibility I'm not saying that we have to follow their model, but I kind of feel like it started out in the same way of, there's a lot of folks that get experience organically outside of institutions, outside of things. And sometimes some folks get into that field by accident, which we see a lot of here. It's not something they may have intended to. My personal history with the internet wasn't even a thing when I was in high school. And my original degree is in English. And it served me my entire career because I have to write for a lot of things. But I kind of figure that if, again, we need to figure out a way to maybe, to Carmen's point of, figure out a way that we have something maybe that's accredited, maybe even at an AA level, if not maybe a bachelor's level kind of discipline. Because right now it just seems like it's always like it's part of someone's job. We stumble into it. We've somehow found, some of us have found careers in it. Myself, a long career in it. But it still feels like if I had to start like, and again, I'm sorry, I forgot your name again. Never mind. In your shoes right now, I kind of feel like it's almost like I'm starting fresh again in that respect. Because again, it's hard to find the jobs. It's hard to find the people that are hiring for those jobs because they may not even know what we do. And I think info security was kind of like that maybe about 10, 15 years ago. And now it's become a thing now that we've had more instances. So I kind of feel like maybe accessibility in general should follow the model. Obviously, we don't have to do it exactly the way it did in it because we're totally different in terms of what we do. But I kind of feel like we just need to get momentum in terms of where kids, and I say kids, that are still in school, the ones below 18, they're true children, to get them interested in what accessibility is about as another way they can work with computers. It's always just hackathons that say, or coding boot camps like, just learn how to develop, just learn how to code, you'll have a job. But there's other things around that code, like project management, I think is a big one. I think because they tend to be gatekeepers, I think, in terms of what gets done and what doesn't. And management as well. I kind of think it should also be part of, MBAs, because that's part of managing a business nowadays. Again, information security, data, systems, accessibility, I think is another system within that, or maybe something that spans systems, but it's just not given that heft behind it just yet. But again, I don't know if we're going to answer this in the next 5 minutes, but I really love the way that you brought up the question initially so we can talk about it. And hopefully this discussion will continue after we're done with today. So. Anyone else? Oh, Darren.
I would just like to say I'm excited and happy hearing these young people. I'm in my mid-career. I've got a little bit left to go, but I feel like the profession or the skill set's going to be in good hands. And I think y'all are going to do great things, and just stick with it. There's going to be ups and downs. Just stick with it, and you're going to get a lot done. And it's great to see, I call them kids too, because I used to teach middle school. So everybody's a kid to me. I just say that, but it's really exciting to see what y'all are going to do, and just get out there and just bring the accessibility, bring the mountain to them, I guess. And then, and then go from there. And good luck. You're going to smash it.
I think it also might be helpful, and I know we haven't really heard much from anyone on the Zoom part of this, but I'm willing to give my information out. Like if you guys want to reach out, and that's for everyone, not just the folks that maybe are starting out, because I know we all help each other. That's what Access U does. I always end up meeting new people every year. Some I've met, have conversations with across many years because of that, and we may not see each other every year, but I kind of feel like if networking, kind of going back to what we talked about originally about relationships, building relationships, I think is what helps us all out as a group and as a discipline, or whatever you want to call us. So I think if we want to put together a list like that, I don't know if there was a mailing list earlier, somebody was putting together a sign-up list. We could make an informal one now and maybe put that out on the Zoom channel or the Slack channel or whatever the appropriate avenue is for that kind of information.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. On the Access U Slack, there is a networking channel. If you haven't had a chance, definitely sign up over there. I still need to do that, so this is a good reminder for me. Well, yeah, we're coming up right to the top of the hour, and I hate to end this conversation because this has been amazing. I'm so glad. Thank you, Deanna, for initiating this question, and thanks for everyone who came and weighed in. And I mean, this is why we're all here, right? I mean, I feel like this is the room, we're doing everything that we're here to do. So I just want to say thank you for contributing and coming.